If you were there in those concert halls during the late 70s and early 80s, you remember how Sylvester owned every inch of that stage. The way he moved, the way he commanded attention, it was more than performance, it was possession. Fans would wait hours just to catch a glimpse of him emerging from the stage door, still glittering with sweat and rhinestones. But there was one night, one single, unrepeatable night, when the legend himself became the audience. When the performers stopped performing and simply listened. 8,000 people watched it happen. Most of them didn't understand what they were witnessing until much later. Some still talk about it in hushed voices, arguing over the details, swearing they'll never forget the sound. Because what emerged from that stage wasn't supposed to be possible. Especially not from someone so small, so young, so utterly unexpected. Before we dive deeper into this extraordinary story, if you appreciate these untold moments from music history, please subscribe to our channel. These stories deserve to be remembered, and your support helps us keep them alive. But what happened next would eclipse everything that came before it. Sylvester was 3 songs into the second set, midway through Dance Disco Heat, when the first disruption occurred. A child suddenly appeared on stage, a little girl, no more than 8, tears streaming down her face. Security moved to remove her, but Sylvester raised his hand. The music stopped. 8,000 people held their breath. Sylvester looked out at the crowd, his mind racing. This was his show, his moment, his carefully constructed spectacle, and a frightened child had just thrown all of that into chaos. He could signal security to gently remove her, could have the house lights brought up while they sorted out the situation, could restart the show once everything was back to normal. That would have been the professional choice, the safe choice, the choice that protected the show and the experience he had promised to 8,000 paying customers. But Sylvester had never been one to make the safe choice, had never built his career on doing what was expected or conventional. And something about this child, standing there trembling in the spotlight, touched something deep in his soul. "What's your name, baby?" he asked, his voice still gentle but now loud enough that everyone could hear. "Sarah," she whispered, and then louder, "Sarah Michelle Porter." "Okay, Sarah Michelle Porter. We're going to find your mama and daddy, I promise you that. But first, I need you to do something for me. Can you be brave and look out at all these people? Can you look really, really carefully and see if you can spot them out there?" The child wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and turned to face the audience. The venue's lighting director, working on pure instinct, began to bring up the house lights gradually, illuminating section after section of the crowd. It was a beautiful thing to watch, actually, thousands of faces emerging from darkness into light, all of them focused on this one small girl, all of them wanting to help, wanting to solve this problem, wanting to reunite a lost child with her parents. You could feel the collective goodwill in that space, the way an entire community was suddenly united in a single purpose. And then, from somewhere in the middle section, about 20 rows back, there was movement. A woman stood up abruptly, her hand flying to her mouth. Next to her, a man was already climbing over seats, not bothering with the aisle, just pushing forward with the desperate urgency of a parent who has found their missing child. They were jumping now, both of them, waving their arms frantically, their voices joining dozens of others who were trying to help, pointing, directing, creating a human arrow pointing toward 2 people who were fighting their way toward the stage. Sylvester saw them before Sarah did, and his face broke into a smile that had nothing to do with performance and everything to do with genuine relief and joy. He pointed toward the commotion, his voice booming through the speakers. "Sarah, baby, look. Right there. See those people jumping? Those are your people, aren't they?" The child's head whipped around, following his gesture, and the transformation was instantaneous. Her face, which had been tight with fear, opened up like a flower. "Mama! Daddy!" The words exploded from her with such force and relief that it brought tears to eyes throughout the venue. People who had never met this child, who would never see her again, found themselves crying along with her, caught up in the universal drama of a family reunited. But then something extraordinary happened. Something that nobody, least of all Sylvester himself, could have anticipated. Sarah turned back to him, and instead of running off the stage toward her parents who were still fighting their way through the crowd, she looked up at the disco legend with an expression that was part wonder, part determination, and entirely serious. "Mr. Sylvester," she said, her voice still small but steadier now, "I want to sing a song." The request was so unexpected, so completely outside the realm of anything that should have happened in that moment, that for several seconds, Sylvester just stared at her. The crowd, which had been moving, shifting, preparing for the reunion and the resumption of the show, went still again. Even the parents, who had nearly reached the front of the stage, stopped in their tracks, looking at each other with expressions that mixed confusion with something that might have been embarrassment or concern. Sylvester later told friends that in that moment, he had about 15 different thoughts flash through his mind simultaneously. This was insane. This would destroy the momentum of his show. His tour manager was probably having a heart attack backstage. Security didn't know what to do. The band was waiting for direction. 8,000 people were watching to see how he would handle this impossible situation. But underneath all of that professional consideration, there was something else, a curiosity, a sense that something important was happening even if he couldn't quite articulate what it was. "You want to sing?" he asked, and there was something in his voice that people who knew him well recognized, a kind of openness, a willingness to let the moment unfold however it needed to unfold. Sarah nodded vigorously. "I know all your songs. I practice them at home. I sing just like you." A ripple of laughter went through the crowd, that gentle, affectionate amusement that adults feel when children make bold claims with absolute confidence. But Sylvester wasn't laughing. He was looking at this child with an intensity that seemed disproportionate to the situation, studying her face as if trying to read something written there in invisible ink. Then, in a move that would later be described as either inspired genius or temporary madness depending on who was telling the story, he did something that veteran performers simply do not do. He held out his microphone to her. "Okay then, baby. Show me what you've got." The venue fell into a silence so complete that you could hear the air conditioning system humming in the ceiling. Sarah took the microphone with both hands, holding it carefully, reverently, like the precious instrument it was. She closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them again, something had shifted in her bearing. The frightened, lost child had been replaced by something else, not exactly confident, but focused, centered, present in a way that seemed impossible for someone so young. She lifted the microphone to her lips, and without any introduction, without any warning, she began to sing. The song she chose was "You Make Me Feel Mighty Real," which was both the most obvious choice and, in many ways, the worst possible choice. It was Sylvester's signature song, the one that everyone in that venue knew by heart, the one that had made him famous. But more than that, it was technically one of his most challenging numbers, requiring a vocal range and control that professional singers struggled to match. The song's famous falsetto sections, the way Sylvester's voice would climb up and up until it seemed to touch the ceiling before descending in those controlled runs, these were techniques that took years to master, elements that had made Sylvester unique in the music industry. For the first few words, there was that terrible anticipation, that mixture of hope and dread that comes when a child attempts something difficult in front of a large audience. Everyone wanted her to succeed, but everyone also knew the odds were against her. Parents in the crowd prepared to clap encouragingly no matter what happened, ready to be supportive even if she couldn't carry a tune. Sarah's own parents, now standing at the foot of the stage, wore expressions of confused pride mixed with anxiety, clearly having no idea that their daughter had this particular ambition. But then her voice opened up, and the entire room seemed to tilt sideways. What came out of that 8-year-old child was not the thin, reedy sound you would expect from someone her age. It was not cute or precious or diminished. It was a voice that had power, control, and a quality that professionals in the music industry call color. A richness and texture that you cannot teach, cannot manufacture, cannot fake. She hit Sylvester's falsetto notes not with the strained effort of someone reaching beyond their range, but with an ease that suggested she had been born with these capabilities already installed. Her pitch was perfect. Her timing was impeccable. Her interpretation of the song showed an understanding of dynamics and emotion that seemed impossible for someone so young. Sylvester's face underwent a series of transformations during those first 30 seconds. Surprise, then shock, then something approaching disbelief, and finally, an expression of pure wonder that people who were close to the stage would remember for the rest of their lives. His backup singers, Martha and Izora, had moved to the edge of the wings to watch, and both of them had their hands over their mouths, their eyes wide. The band members had stopped pretending to be casual and were now openly staring at the child on stage. And throughout the venue, 8,000 people were experiencing a collective moment of recognition that they were witnessing something genuinely extraordinary. Sarah sang the entire first verse and chorus without faltering, without showing any sign of nerves or hesitation. Her voice soared through the venue with that same quality that had made Sylvester famous, that ability to take a disco song and infuse it with genuine soul, with gospel truth, with emotional authenticity that transcended the genre. When she finally finished and lowered the microphone, the silence that followed lasted perhaps 2 full seconds before the venue exploded into applause that seemed to shake the building's foundations. But Sylvester wasn't applauding. He was standing there, motionless, staring at this child as if she had just performed a magic trick that he couldn't figure out. Then, moving with sudden decision, he turned and made urgent gestures toward the wings. His stage manager appeared immediately, accustomed to reading his signals even in the most chaotic situations. Sylvester leaned in close, speaking rapidly, his words too quiet for the microphone to catch but his intensity clear to everyone watching. The stage manager's expression shifted from confusion to surprise to something approaching excitement, and then he was gone, disappearing back into the wings. Sylvester turned back to Sarah, kneeling down again to bring himself to her eye level. When he spoke, his voice carried that same gentleness from before, but now there was an undercurrent of something else, respect, perhaps, or recognition. Baby, that was something special. Really special. Where did you learn to sing like that? Sarah shrugged with the unself-conscious ease of a child who doesn't fully understand what she possesses. I just sing. Mama says I was singing before I could talk right. I listened to your records all the time. I know every song. Every song? Sylvester repeated, and there was a challenge in his voice now, that performer's instinct to test, to verify. Even the hard ones? Even the hard ones, Sarah confirmed with absolute confidence. A smile spread across Sylvester's face, mischievous and delighted in equal measure. He stood up, addressing the crowd now, bringing them into the moment. Well, San Francisco, it seems like we have a situation here. This young lady says she knows all my songs, even the hard ones. What do you think? Should we test that? The crowd roared its approval, completely invested now in this unexpected turn of events. The planned show had been abandoned without anyone really noticing or caring. Something more interesting was happening, something spontaneous and real, and everyone in that venue understood that they were participants in something that would be talked about for years. What none of them knew, what even Sylvester himself didn't know yet, was that the most extraordinary part of the evening was still to come. Sarah loves your music so much. She plays your records until we think we'll go crazy hearing the same songs over and over. She told us she wanted to see you perform more than anything in the world. We didn't know how to say no to her. Something passed across Sylvester's face then, a flicker of emotion that people close to the stage recognized as empathy mixed with recognition. He knew what it meant to want something so badly that it hurt, to see your family sacrifice for your dreams, to carry the weight of other people's hopes along with your own. He turned back to Sarah, and when he spoke, his voice had changed, softer, more serious, heavy with a significance that the child probably couldn't fully understand but everyone else in the venue could feel. Sarah Michelle Porter, I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Can you do that? Sarah nodded, her earlier confidence mixing with a hint of nervousness now that her parents were present, now that whatever was happening was starting to feel more real and less like an adventure. I'm going to ask you to sing one more song. But this time, I'm going to pick the song, and it's going to be one of my hardest. It's a song that makes professional singers nervous, a song that requires everything you've got. If you want to say no, that's okay. Nobody will think less of you. But if you say yes, I need you to give it everything. Do you understand? The child looked at him, then at her parents, then back at Sylvester. When she spoke, her voice was steady. I can do it. He asked her to sing one more song, Stars, one of his most challenging pieces. She nailed every note. Sylvester stood off to the side, watching her, and on his face was an expression that veteran performers would recognize. The look of someone who has just witnessed the passing of a torch, who has seen the future announce itself and knows that everything is about to change. When Sarah finished, when that final note had faded into silence and the crowd erupted once more into thunderous applause, he moved to her quickly and pulled her into an embrace that was captured by photographers and would appear in newspapers the next day, though none of the articles that accompanied those photos could quite capture what that embrace meant. He turned to her parents, still holding Sarah, and when he spoke his voice was thick with emotion. "I need to talk with you after the show. Please, I'm asking you to stay. My team will take care of you, get you comfortable somewhere backstage where you can relax. This is important. Will you stay?" The parents looked at each other, communicating in that wordless way that long-married couples develop, and then nodded in unison. Sylvester signaled to his stage manager, who appeared instantly with several staff members. Instructions were given, arrangements were made, and within minutes, Sarah and her family were being escorted off stage to private areas normally reserved for VIP guests and performers. The show resumed, but it was different now, charged with an energy that came from having witnessed something real break through the artifice of performance. Sylvester threw himself into the remaining songs with renewed intensity, as if Sarah's unexpected appearance had reminded him of why he performed in the first place, what music could mean, what it could do. The crowd responded with equal intensity, feeding off his energy, creating a feedback loop that turned the rest of the concert into something legendary. People who attended other shows on that tour would later swear that nothing compared to that night in San Francisco, that something magical had happened that could never be replicated. But backstage, in a quiet room away from the noise and lights, a conversation was taking place that would change multiple lives forever. After the show, Sylvester made an extraordinary offer. He would sponsor Sarah's entire musical education, voice lessons, performance training, industry connections. Everything. The family, barely able to afford the concert ticket, sat in stunned silence. The father was shaking his head, not in refusal but in disbelief. This is too much. We can't, how would we even? You don't have to decide right now, Sylvester said quickly. Take some time. Think about it. Talk to each other. Talk to Sarah. My manager will give you his card, and when you're ready, you can call and we'll work out all the details. He leaned forward, his voice becoming more intense. But I need you to understand something. This isn't about me being generous or charitable. This is about your daughter having something that the world needs to hear. And I'm in a position to help make that happen. If you say yes, it will change your lives. There will be challenges and difficulties and moments when you question the decision. But the alternative, letting her talent go undeveloped, watching her end up working some normal job while knowing what she could have been, that's a tragedy I can't be part of. The months and years that followed that night became the stuff of music industry legend, though the full story remained largely private, known only to those directly involved. Over the next 18 months, Sarah trained intensively with the best vocal coaches in San Francisco. Sylvester mentored her personally, introducing her to industry professionals and carefully managing her first performances. Then came 1988, a year that would test everything they had built together. Then came 1988. Sylvester was diagnosed with AIDS. He had less than a year. Instead of retreating, he intensified Sarah's training, pouring everything he knew into her while his body slowly failed. He shared his own experiences of discrimination and triumph, of fighting to be seen and heard in an industry that often wanted to diminish him. He made sure she understood that her talent came with obligations, that having a voice meant using it for more than just commercial success. In December of 1988, Sylvester died, leaving behind a legacy that extended far beyond his recorded music. The funeral was massive, attended by thousands who came to honor a man who had transformed disco music and challenged societal norms while doing it. Sarah sang at the service, performing stars with a maturity and emotional depth that left no one unmoved. Her voice, still young but now trained and powerful, filled the cathedral with the same soaring quality that Sylvester's had possessed. As she sang, people throughout the congregation whispered to each other, "He lives on through her," they said. The torch has been passed. People who claimed to have been there that night numbered far more than the actual attendance, everyone wanting to be part of the moment when destiny had announced itself on stage. The recording of Sarah's impromptu performance, captured by the venue's archival system, became one of the most valuable pieces of music memorabilia in existence, though Sarah refused every offer to sell it, keeping it instead as a private reminder of where everything began. Sarah's parents, who had walked into that concert struggling to make ends meet, found their lives transformed in ways that extended far beyond financial security. They watched their daughter become a star, yes, but more importantly, they watched her become a force for good in an industry often criticized for its exploitation and superficiality. The decision they had made that night to trust a stranger's offer, to believe in possibilities that seemed too good to be true, had proven to be the most important choice of their lives. The music she created throughout her career bore Sylvester's influence in subtle but unmistakable ways. Her vocal style, while uniquely her own, carried echoes of his fearless approach to falsetto and his ability to infuse disco and pop with genuine soul. Her stage presence reflected the lessons Marcus Webb had taught her, which had themselves come from Sylvester's understanding of performance as communion rather than mere entertainment. Her choice of material often returned to themes of identity, acceptance, and community, the same themes that had defined Sylvester's work and his life. And somewhere, in archives and memories and the continued relevance of his music, Sylvester's legacy continued to grow. New generations discovered his recordings, drawn by samples in contemporary songs or references in documentaries about music history. His influence on disco, on dance music, on the very concept of performance as self-expression rather than self-concealment, became more widely recognized and celebrated. LGBTQ youth finding their way in a world that still often rejected them discovered in his music and his story a model of fearless authenticity, of refusing to be diminished or hidden, of transforming pain and marginalization into art that made people move and feel and think. The night at the San Francisco Civic Auditorium, that moment when everything changed, became a touchstone in multiple narratives: the story of Sylvester's generosity, the story of Sarah's rise, the story of what can happen when talent meets opportunity meets compassion. People who had been there that night, who had actually witnessed the events unfold rather than just hearing about them later, spoke of it with a reverence usually reserved for spiritual experiences. They described the feeling in that venue when Sarah's voice first opened up, the collective intake of breath when everyone realized they were hearing something extraordinary, the sense that the universe had briefly revealed its mechanisms and shown them how fate actually worked. Sarah's own children, when they were old enough to understand, listened to their mother tell the story and asked the same questions everyone asked: what if she hadn't gotten lost that night? What if security had removed her before Sylvester noticed? What if he had decided not to give her the microphone, not to offer his support, not to invest in someone else's future while facing his own mortality? Sarah's answer was always the same. Then someone else would have discovered my voice eventually, or maybe they wouldn't have, but the point isn't what might have happened. The point is what did happen, and why it happened that way. Sylvester didn't help me because he thought I would become famous and reflect well on him. He helped me because he believed that talent deserved to be nurtured and that success created obligations. Those lessons matter more than anything else I learned from him. The years accumulated, building into decades, and still the story retained its power. Still it was told at music schools and industry events, still it appeared in textbooks and documentaries, still it inspired people to look beyond the obvious, to see potential where others saw only inconvenience or interruption. The recording of that night, finally released publicly on the 25th anniversary of Sylvester's death with Sarah's permission and all proceeds going to AIDS research, became one of the most streamed historical music recordings of all time. People listened to it and heard not just two voices but an entire philosophy of art and community crystallized into song. And through it all, disco balls kept spinning in clubs and concert halls around the world, scattering light into fragments that touched everyone within reach, just as Sylvester's brief intervention in one family's life had scattered effects far beyond what anyone could have predicted that June night in 1979. The music played on. The dance continued. And somewhere in the pattern of light and sound and human connection, the spirit of a performer who stopped his show to help a frightened child lived on, proving that the most important performances sometimes happen when we step outside the script and simply respond to the human moment unfolding in front of us. The legend of Sylvester James Jr. encompasses many things. His revolutionary music, his boundary-breaking performances, his role in LGBT history, his artistic innovations. But perhaps his most enduring legacy is contained in that single decision on a San Francisco stage, when he chose compassion over convenience and possibility over protocol, and in doing so, demonstrated that greatness isn't just about what you achieve for yourself but about what you make possible for others. In the end, that's what made him not just a star but something more lasting, a light that continues to guide others long after the original source has gone dark, continuing to illuminate paths for those still finding their way. Today, Sylvester's legacy lives on not only in music but in the lives of anyone striving to live with courage and empathy. Sharing his story, listening to his music, supporting young artists, and celebrating differences, all of these are ways to follow the path he showed us. Every time you hand someone a microphone, recognize someone's talent, or honor diversity, his light shines once more. This story reminds us that true greatness isn't found only in the applause on stage, it's in the courage to lift up the potential of others. Now it's your turn. Take a step to keep Sylvester's legacy alive. Share his story with friends, support an emerging talent, put on his music, and dance. Because sometimes the most important performances don't happen on stage, they happen in the moments of kindness we show to the people around us. And with every step, every move, every note, Sylvester's spirit continues, inspiring us, entertaining us, and reminding us to connect with one another.